It was a Thursday afternoon when Emily received the message that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family. The words flashed on her screen in a sharp, jarring burst. "You ruined my life." Her heart skipped a beat. She blinked, staring at her phone as if the message might disappear. But it stayed, staring back at her, each word sinking deeper into her chest. The screen seemed to hum with the weight of those 5 simple words. "You ruined my life." It wasn't the first time her younger sister, Lauren, had lashed out at her. But this time felt different. This wasn't a fleeting tantrum or a petty argument. The tone was venomous, as though Lauren truly believed that everything that had gone wrong in her life was Emily's fault. Emily's mind raced. What did I do? She thought. How could I possibly ruin her life? The phone in her hand felt heavy, as if it were filled with lead. Her finger hovered over the screen, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to respond, to demand an explanation, to fight back against the accusation. But what could she say? How could she explain that she never meant to hurt Lauren, that she had always done her best to be the responsible, perfect older sister? She'd never intentionally damaged anything in her sister's life. Was this about Mom and Dad? In the past few months, Lauren had been growing increasingly distant from her. They'd always had their differences, of course, what siblings didn't. But lately, their relationship had soured. Emily had noticed how Lauren started resenting her for reasons that were impossible to pinpoint. Maybe it was because their parents seemed to lean on Emily more, expecting her to take care of everything, while Lauren got more room to do what she wanted. Maybe it was something deeper, something Emily had missed. But this was different. This wasn't just a normal sibling fight. This was a declaration. Before Emily could type out a response, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail from her mother. Her stomach clenched. Emily had a sinking feeling she knew what this was about. "Emily," her mother's voice crackled through the speaker. "I just talked to Lauren. She's really upset about everything that's been happening. She says you ruined her life. I don't know what happened, but you need to make things right. Please, just listen to her." Ruined her life? Emily's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea what had happened, but she could feel the weight of her mother's words like a punch to the gut. Her mother wasn't even trying to get her side of the story. She was already taking Lauren's side. Emily had always been the responsible one. The one who was dependable, who never caused trouble. And now, her own family was turning against her. The phone slipped from her hand, landing with a soft thud on the couch beside her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she fought them back. She had cried enough over the years. She wasn't going to let this break her, not like before. But where do I go from here? She had always done everything right. She had worked hard to keep the peace, to make sure her parents didn't have to worry. And this was how they repaid her? By siding with Lauren? She thought of the times she had stayed up late, taking care of the house and making sure everything was in order. The countless sacrifices she had made to make sure her younger sister never felt neglected. All the moments she'd smiled through when she really just wanted to scream. And now? Now, she was being blamed for something she didn't even understand. Emily stood up and walked toward the window, looking out over the neighborhood. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. It should have been a peaceful evening, a time to relax after a long day. But instead, her world felt like it was crumbling. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. How did it get to this point? Her fingers hovered over her phone, once again torn between calling her mother, texting Lauren back, or just walking away and letting them deal with it. But how could she just walk away? She loved them, even if they didn't understand her anymore. She had spent so many years trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister, and now it felt like everything was falling apart. Before she could make a decision, her phone rang again. This time, it was from her father. This is it, Emily thought. This is when they tell me I've gone too far, that I need to come home and apologize. She took a deep breath and answered the call. Dad, she said, her voice shaky, I don't know what's going on. What's happening? Why is Lauren saying this? Her father's voice was calm, almost too calm. Emily, we just want you to listen to Lauren. She's really hurt, and she needs you. You know how she can get, but we're worried about her. You need to fix this. Fix this. That was all her father had to say. Dad, Emily said, her voice now trembling with frustration, I didn't do anything. I don't know what I've done to her, but I'm not going to just apologize for something I didn't do. I'm not asking you to apologize, her father said, his voice suddenly sharp. I'm asking you to listen. This is your sister. We can't just let things go like this. You need to be there for her. She clenched her fists, the anger bubbling up inside her. Why wasn't anyone listening to her? I can't, she whispered. I can't keep being the person who fixes everything for everyone. I need to be myself. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Emily could feel the weight of her father's disappointment in the quiet between them. Finally, her father spoke. I'm sorry you feel that way, but Lauren needs you. Please think about it. The call ended, and Emily stood there for a moment, her mind racing. She needed to think. She couldn't keep living this way, constantly trying to meet everyone's expectations, losing herself in the process. She looked back at the phone on the couch, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of something, freedom. Maybe it was time for her to leave. To stop being the person everyone expected her to be. Maybe it was time for her to find out who she really was. Without another word, Emily grabbed her keys, walked out the door, and didn't look back. As she drove away from her childhood home, she could feel the tension slowly easing from her shoulders. This was the beginning of something new. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Growing up, Emily had always been the one who followed the rules. The one who did everything by the book. It was expected of her, and for the most part, she was okay with it. After all, being the oldest meant that she had to set an example, right? But somewhere along the way, things changed. She began to feel more like a placeholder, a stand-in for someone who was just supposed to be perfect. The family's rock, the responsible one, the one who would never disappoint. And it wasn't like she didn't want to help. Emily loved her family with all her heart, but sometimes it felt like that love was conditional, like she was only loved for what she could do, not for who she was. Her younger sister Lauren, on the other hand, had always been the opposite. Spontaneous, carefree, and full of life, Lauren seemed to float effortlessly through the world. Where Emily tried to control everything, Lauren seemed to glide from one adventure to the next without a care in the world. Their parents had always doted on her, perhaps because she was the baby of the family, perhaps because they could never quite figure her out. But growing up, Emily had done everything she could to try and win her parents' approval. She'd always been the good girl who took care of things when they were too busy or distracted. When their father was away on business, it was Emily who made sure dinner was on the table. When their mother had a hard day, it was Emily who picked up the slack around the house. She made sure to get straight A's, excel at every extracurricular, and keep a calm demeanor, even when she felt the pressure suffocating her. Lauren, in contrast, didn't seem to worry about any of that. She would come home late from hanging out with friends, throw her things around the living room, and still get praised for her infectious energy. Emily never understood why their parents seemed to let Lauren get away with everything while she was expected to be perfect all the time. The tension between them started small. A little jealousy here and there, some snide comments, but it didn't feel like it was anything that couldn't be fixed. After all, they were sisters. Sisters fought, but they always made up. Or so Emily thought. It wasn't until a few years ago, when Emily had just turned 18, that things started to go downhill. The rift between her and Lauren began to widen, slowly at first, like cracks in the foundation of a house. It all started with the college application process. Emily had been accepted into one of the top universities in the country, but rather than celebrating her success, her parents had almost been too busy to notice. They had been caught up in Lauren's own struggles. She was struggling to find her place in school, unsure of what she wanted to do. While Emily had been clear about her future, Lauren felt lost, and that feeling of uncertainty weighed heavily on her. One day, after Emily had gotten her acceptance letter, Lauren had asked her in a casual, almost offhand manner, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Emily, caught off guard by the question, had hesitated. "What do you mean?" Lauren shrugged. "I don't know. Do you ever wonder if everything you're doing is just because mom and dad want you to?" At the time, Emily didn't know how to respond. She had never questioned her path. She had always followed the rules because it felt like that was the way things were supposed to go. But after that conversation, something inside her started to shift. Did she really want to do all of this for her parents? Soon after, everything came to a head. Emily received a prestigious scholarship offer to attend her dream university in another state, a chance to finally break free from the life that had been planned out for her. But instead of excitement, there was fear. Fear of leaving Lauren behind. Fear that their family would fall apart if she took that step. Lauren's response to the news wasn't what Emily had expected. Instead of congratulating her, Lauren just stared at her in silence. The look in her eyes was hard to read. Was it jealousy? Disappointment? Emily couldn't tell, but she could feel the weight of it all the same. The awkwardness in the air only grew over the next few weeks. On the night before Emily was supposed to leave, they had their first real fight. It was an explosion that Emily wasn't prepared for. "You're leaving me," Lauren had said, her voice shaky with emotion. "You're just leaving. Like I don't matter." Emily had been stunned. "Lauren, it's not like that. This is my future." "No," Lauren had spat. "It's your future, not mine. You're always the one who gets everything. You get to go to a fancy school, you get to be mom and dad's perfect child, and I'm just here, trying to figure it out. It's not fair." The words hit harder than Emily could have imagined. She had always felt like the one doing all the sacrificing, the one giving up her own desires to make sure everyone else was happy. But here, in that moment, Lauren made it clear that she had felt abandoned all along. She had felt like Emily had it all, and that Emily was too focused on her own future to see how much Lauren was struggling. Emily had tried to explain, tried to tell Lauren that it wasn't about her, that she had to go because this was her chance to build a life of her own. But Lauren wouldn't listen. The next day, Emily left. The weeks that followed were a blur. Emily threw herself into her studies, focusing on the new world she was about to enter. But no matter how hard she tried to move on, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something between her and Lauren. It wasn't until that phone call, the one that had come just a few hours ago, that Emily realized how deep the rift really went. And now, as she stood in the middle of her apartment, looking at her phone and feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her, Emily had a choice to make. Was she going to let the bitterness tear her apart? Was she going to keep trying to prove herself to a family that didn't seem to understand her, or was she going to finally take control of her own life? For the first time, Emily felt the weight of her own desires. And she knew one thing for sure: this was going to be the hardest choice she had ever made. Emily's first few weeks after leaving home had been a whirlwind of new experiences and challenges. Living alone in her small, rented apartment in a bustling city had brought both freedom and a sense of isolation she hadn't anticipated. The sounds of traffic, distant conversations, and the city's steady hum were a constant reminder of how far she had come from the life she had known. It was exhilarating, and at the same time, it was suffocating. Every morning, Emily would wake up with a quiet hope, as though today might be the day when things between her and her family would go back to normal. But each day, as she checked her phone, her inbox remained eerily silent. No calls, no messages, nothing from Lauren, nothing from her parents. The silence was a stark contrast to the chaos she had left behind, the constant demand to meet everyone's expectations, to be the responsible, dependable one. Now she was alone with her thoughts, but those thoughts only seemed to circle back to the same issue: Lauren. The message Lauren had sent her, "You ruined my life," stuck with Emily, gnawing at her mind like a broken record. What did it mean? What had she done to warrant such anger? Why was Lauren so furious with her? Emily racked her brain, trying to make sense of the situation. Days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself waiting. Every time her phone rang, her heart would skip, hoping it was a call from Lauren or their parents. But every time, it wasn't. It was either a telemarketer or a friend she hadn't spoken to in months. The lack of communication from her family weighed heavily on her, even though she had promised herself she wouldn't let it drag her down. Then, one day, out of the blue, Emily received a call that changed everything. It was from her mother. "Emily, we need to talk." Her mother's voice came through, urgent but strained. "Please, just hear me out." For a split second, Emily's heart raced with hope. Was this the moment things were going to get better? Was her mother finally going to listen to her side of the story? She took a deep breath, pushing down the mix of anger and longing that had been building up inside her for weeks. "Okay, Mom," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before her mother finally spoke. "It's about Lauren. She's not doing well, Emily. She's been really depressed lately, and she's blaming everything on you." I don't know how to fix this." The words hit Emily like a cold wave, knocking the air out of her lungs. She had always known that Lauren struggled with her own issues, but to hear that it had come to this, blaming everything on her, was a shock. "I didn't ruin her life, Mom," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand why she's saying that. I've always tried to help her. Why doesn't she see that?" Her mother's voice wavered as she responded, "I know you've tried, sweetie. But right now, Lauren feels abandoned. She's not processing things well. I think she's pushing you away because she's afraid you're leaving her for good." Emily could feel her anger simmering, but she held it back. She tried to stay calm. "I didn't abandon her, Mom. I just needed to live my own life. I didn't leave because of her." "I know," her mother said, "but Lauren doesn't see it that way. She feels like you don't care about her anymore. That you've chosen your own future over your family." Emily's chest tightened. This was it. This was the moment when she realized that no matter how much she tried, no matter how hard she worked, she would never be able to fix the damage that had already been done. To Lauren, she would always be the one who left. The one who was selfish. The one who had chosen herself. It was a feeling that Emily couldn't shake, a sense of futility. How could she make Lauren understand? How could she ever be the sister Lauren needed when everything Emily did seemed to push her further away? "I don't know what to do anymore, Mom," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I tried to help, but I can't keep living in the shadow of everyone else's expectations. I have to live for me." Her mother was silent for a moment, and Emily could hear the sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. When her mother spoke again, it was with a firmness Emily hadn't expected. "You can't just turn your back on your family. You need to fix things with Lauren. She's in a bad place, and you're the only one who can reach her. Please, Emily. For the sake of all of us." Emily didn't respond immediately. Her mind was spinning. She didn't know what her mother expected from her. What was she supposed to do? Move back home and pick up where she had left off? Pretend like everything was fine? Be the person who had to put everyone else's needs above her own? She knew that was the role she had played for years, but she couldn't go back to that. Not after everything she had worked for. And yet, the guilt gnawed at her. The guilt of knowing that Lauren was struggling, the guilt of leaving her behind, the guilt of feeling like she had failed as a sister. The call ended with her mother's words still hanging in the air. "Just think about it, Emily. Please." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily went through the motions: work, errands, dinner, but her mind was consumed with the conversation. She knew that the rift between her and Lauren wasn't just about her leaving for college. It was about everything that had built up over the years. The years of sacrifices, of being the good daughter, of giving everything and getting nothing in return. But now it seemed that her sister's pain was taking center stage, and Emily was expected to fix it. The pressure was unbearable. What was she supposed to do? Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Lauren. "You've made your choice. I'll never forgive you for what you did." Emily's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. Her heart sank. It was official. The damage was done. And it felt like there was no going back. Emily wasn't sure what she had expected after the call with her mother, but what followed was nothing like she imagined. The next few days were filled with a growing sense of unease as she tried to process everything: Lauren's anger, her mother's desperate plea, and the weight of being the good daughter. She had come to college to escape the suffocating expectations, but now her family's problems were following her, dragging her back into a world she had hoped to leave behind. The hardest part wasn't the silence. It was the guilt of leaving. The guilt of chasing her own future when Lauren had been left behind. The guilt of being the one everyone looked to for stability when, in reality, Emily was anything but stable. Her life, as free as it seemed, was constantly overshadowed by the voices of expectation from her parents and her own unresolved feelings toward her sister. Her life had been moving forward in a linear fashion: classes, work, small victories, but it suddenly felt like everything was being put on pause. She couldn't escape her family's grip, and every time she sat down to focus on her studies or simply take a break, she found herself pulled back to the one question that had been plaguing her: what happens next? It wasn't until one evening, when she was walking back to her apartment after a long day, that everything shifted. Her phone buzzed as she stepped off the subway, and for a moment, she thought it was just another text from one of her friends. But when she looked down, her heart stopped. The message was from Lauren. "You're not the person I thought you were." That was it. Short, cold, and filled with a raw, sharp bitterness that Emily could almost feel through the screen. Lauren's words stung, but they also sparked something deep within her, a flicker of anger. Why did Lauren keep blaming her for everything? Why couldn't she see the sacrifices Emily had made to try to be there for her? As she stood on the street corner, the weight of the message sinking in, Emily realized that she had reached her breaking point. There was no running away from this anymore. She couldn't just ignore the problem and hope it would go away. There was no escaping the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders. But this wasn't just about fixing her relationship with Lauren. No, this was about her reclaiming her own life, her own space, her own identity. She couldn't stay in the suffocating silence any longer. It was time to confront her family and Lauren head-on. Without thinking too much, she dialed her mother's number. She needed to talk. She needed to understand how to move forward, even if it meant walking away from everything she had known. Her mother picked up almost immediately. "Emily? Is everything okay?" Her voice sounded tentative, like she was afraid of what Emily might say. "I'm fine, Mom," Emily replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "But we need to talk about Lauren. I can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" her mother asked, confused. "What do you mean?" "I can't keep being the one who holds everything together," Emily said, her words coming faster now. "I've been the one sacrificing for years, and now I'm trying to live my life. I'm not the person you want me to be anymore. I can't keep living for everyone else. Not when it's tearing me apart." Her mother was silent for a moment, and Emily could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. "Emily, I don't understand," her mother started, But Emily cut her off. No, Mom. You don't understand. I've been there for everyone. I've given up my own happiness for years just to keep this family from falling apart, but I can't do it anymore. I need to take care of myself now. And if that means stepping away from this, if that means stepping away from you, from Lauren, then that's what I have to do. It was hard to say those words, but once they were out there, they didn't feel like a betrayal. They felt like freedom. I'm sorry, Mom, Emily continued, her voice breaking despite her efforts to stay composed. But I can't keep carrying this burden. I need to make choices for myself, even if they hurt. Her mother's voice wavered. Emily, you don't have to walk away from your family. You don't have to make this choice. No, Emily said firmly, I do. Because it's not just about Lauren anymore. It's about me. I've been suffocating under the weight of everyone's expectations for so long, I've forgotten who I am. And I need to find that person again. Her mother didn't respond immediately, and Emily could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind. For years, Emily had been the perfect daughter. The one who was always there. The one who always did what was expected. And now, she was telling her mother that she couldn't do it anymore. It felt liberating. I'll always be your daughter, Mom, Emily said, her voice softening. But I need to live for me now. I can't keep trying to fix everything for everyone. There was a long silence before her mother spoke again, this time with a resigned tone. I don't know what to say, Emily. I don't know if you're making the right decision, but I guess I understand. I just want you to know that we love you. I love you too, Mom, Emily replied. But I can't keep doing this. As Emily ended the call and stood there, the weight of her decision began to settle over her. She had made the hardest choice of her life, and yet there was a sense of relief that followed. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't living for anyone but herself. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. She still had to face Lauren, still had to figure out how to navigate the complicated relationship with her family. But for the first time in years, Emily felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but she was ready for it. The days after her conversation with her mother felt both suffocating and liberating, as though Emily was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into an unknown abyss. The weight of her decision to step away from her family's expectations had yet to fully settle in, but it felt undeniable. She couldn't go back. There was no undoing the words she had spoken, no retracting the distance she had put between herself and her family. What had started as an effort to find herself, something she never even realized she had lost, was now a fracture, a chasm that divided her from the people she had always been close to. The relief, though real, came with a gnawing emptiness. There was a sense of finality to it, an understanding that her relationship with her family would never be the same. But was that a bad thing? She wasn't sure anymore. Her phone rang again late one evening. It was a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. It was from her hometown. Her heart pounded in her chest, her hands trembling as she answered. This was it. This was the moment where it all changed. Emily? It was her mother, but her voice was strained, more than it had been during their last conversation. There was an underlying tension, a quiet fear. Mom? Emily replied, already bracing herself for what was coming. I don't know how to say this, but it's Lauren, her mother's voice cracked. She's in the hospital. The world around Emily seemed to stop, the words taking a few moments to fully process in her mind. Hospital? What do you mean? What happened? She demanded, her voice now tight with concern, the panic rising in her chest. She tried to hurt herself, Emily. She's in critical condition. I don't even know how to explain it. She's in such a bad place. For a long moment, Emily didn't know what to do or say. The floor beneath her feet felt unstable, her head spinning as the weight of her mother's words pressed down on her. Everything she had been running from, Everything she had been trying to escape was now crashing into her with brutal clarity. Lauren's pain, her bitterness, her accusations, it all felt so insignificant in comparison to the terrifying reality that her sister might be gone. But even amid the rising panic, there was a nagging thought that wouldn't let go. This is my fault. It felt like an instinct, a reflex, the culmination of years of family dynamics that placed her in the position of constant caretaker, the one expected to always fix things. Emily's mind raced. She needed to be there. She needed to go back home. She couldn't stay away any longer. But then the weight of her decision to distance herself hit her. Could she go back after everything she had said? Would they even want her there? And most importantly, was she strong enough to face her family again? Mom, I'll come. I'll be on the next flight out. Emily's voice was hoarse, barely recognizable to her own ears. Please, Emily, we need you here. Lauren needs you, her mother's voice broke. She doesn't understand why you left. I don't know if she'll even make it through this. I don't know if she'll ever forgive you. The words pierced through Emily like a sharp, unforgiving blade. She had already known that Lauren was angry with her, that she had been struggling with feelings of abandonment, but this was something she wasn't prepared for. I'll be there, Emily repeated, feeling a pang of guilt twist in her stomach. I'm coming home. The phone call ended, but the heavy silence lingered long after. Emily stood in her apartment, her hands shaking as she set the phone down. Her mind was in turmoil, her emotions a whirlwind of confusion, regret, and fear. She had thought leaving was the right decision. She had convinced herself that her family was holding her back, stifling her growth, and that she needed to create her own path. But now, faced with the reality of Lauren's suicide attempt, Emily wasn't so sure anymore. The flight back to her hometown felt like an eternity. It was a blur of airport terminals, security checks, and the quiet hum of the plane engines. But every minute of it felt heavy, laden with the weight of everything she had left behind. When she finally landed and made her way to the hospital, her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She couldn't stop her thoughts from racing, from imagining what Lauren's condition might be like. What if it was too late? What if she hadn't been there when Lauren needed her most? Her family was waiting in the sterile, cold hospital waiting room. Her parents, looking older and worn down, were seated with their heads bowed. The air was thick with tension, the silence almost suffocating. As Emily entered, her mother's eyes flickered up to meet hers. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The look in her mother's eyes said everything: pain, disappointment, hope, and an undeniable sense of helplessness. Emily's gaze drifted toward her father, who remained silent, his expression unreadable. But then, her attention shifted to Lauren's hospital bed. There she was, pale, fragile, and hooked up to monitors. Her breathing was shallow, her face expressionless, almost as if she were asleep, but Emily knew better. The sight of her sister, her angry, broken sister, reduced Emily to tears. All the bitterness, all the anger, all the words they had exchanged, they felt meaningless now. All Emily could see was the vulnerability of the person she had always tried to protect, the one she had unknowingly hurt by leaving. She stepped forward, her breath hitching in her chest. She had no idea what to say, what to do. Words felt inadequate now, useless. I'm so sorry, Lauren, Emily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Lauren didn't respond. Her eyes remained closed, her body still. But Emily was determined to stay, to be there for her sister now, no matter what it took. She wasn't going to leave this time. She couldn't. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The sterile smell of the hospital lingered in Emily's nostrils as she sat next to Lauren's bed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The minutes felt like hours, and the hours stretched out like days. Lauren had been unconscious for what felt like forever, and Emily found herself whispering things she wasn't sure her sister could hear. Each word was a plea, a wish for things to be different, for a different outcome than the one they had ended up with. "I'm here, Lauren," Emily said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. Please come back. Please wake up." She wasn't sure why she kept saying the same thing over and over. It felt like she was grasping at straws, trying to hold on to something she didn't fully understand. But the silence that hung in the air was too much for her to bear. The guilt was suffocating, a weight on her chest that made every breath feel heavy. Her parents had barely spoken since Emily arrived. Her mother was curled up in a chair by the window, her face buried in her hands, while her father sat silently at the other side of the room. They both looked older, worn out, the stress of the past few days taking its toll. It was clear that they hadn't slept in days. The tension in the room was palpable. Emily could feel it, thick and suffocating. "Emily," her mother finally spoke, her voice shaky. You don't know how much this has affected your sister. She thought you didn't care anymore. She thought you abandoned her." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She hadn't meant for any of it to happen. She had thought she was doing what was best for her own life, trying to find herself, break free from the weight of her family's expectations. But Lauren had seen it as something else entirely. "I never wanted to hurt her," Emily whispered, her eyes never leaving Lauren's fragile figure. I thought that if I stayed, I'd just be part of the problem. But I never wanted to leave her. I never wanted to abandon her. I thought I had to." Her mother let out a sigh, a deep, mournful sound that echoed through the room. "I don't know how to fix this, Emily," she said quietly. "I don't know how to fix any of this." Emily didn't have an answer for that. There was no easy fix. There was no quick solution to the mess that had been made, to the years of miscommunication, of misunderstandings, of silent resentment that had built up between them all. It wasn't just Lauren who had been hurt. Emily could feel the strain in her relationship with her parents, too. The expectations they had placed on her, the roles they had assigned to her as the responsible one, the perfect daughter, it had all weighed so heavily on her that she had never realized how much she was suffocating under it all. And yet, even now, in this moment of crisis, she didn't know how to escape that weight. She wasn't sure how to be what her family needed, not without losing herself in the process. The door to the room opened suddenly, and a nurse stepped inside, her face a picture of professionalism, but with a hint of sympathy in her eyes. "Miss Parker," she said gently, addressing Emily, "your sister's condition has stabilized for now. She's still unconscious, but we've been able to control the immediate risks. We'll need to keep monitoring her, but she's in the best possible care." Emily felt her heart give a small, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. It wasn't over yet, but it was something. Lauren was still alive, and that was all that mattered at the moment. Can I stay with her?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse nodded, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "Of course. I'll let you know if we need to make any changes, but she's stable for now." As the nurse left, Emily returned to her seat beside Lauren's bed. The room was quiet again, save for the soft beep of the machines that monitored her sister's vital signs. Emily reached out and took Lauren's hand in hers, squeezing it gently. "I'm sorry, Lauren," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't know. I didn't see how much you were hurting. I thought I was protecting myself. But I see now. I should have been here for you. I should have never left." The tears she had been holding back for so long finally came. They slid down her cheeks in quiet, steady streams, a silent release of all the pain she had been holding onto for years. There had been so much anger, so much hurt, so much confusion between them, but now it all seemed so insignificant in the face of what was really important. She had spent so much of her life running away from the past, from the weight of her family's expectations, but in the end, it had all come down to this moment. She was here for Lauren now, and no matter what happened, she wasn't going to leave her again. Her thoughts turned to her parents. She could feel the tension between them, the years of unspoken words hanging in the air like a fog. There was no easy way to fix what had been broken, no way to take back all the mistakes, all the misunderstandings. But Emily knew something now, something she hadn't understood before. Healing wasn't about fixing everything. It was about showing up, even when it seemed impossible. It was about being there for the people you loved, even when you didn't know how to make things right. And that was exactly what Emily was going to do now. She would stay. She would be there for Lauren, for her parents, and for herself. She would stop running from the hard conversations, stop avoiding the things that scared her the most. Because in the end, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying. And trying, she realized, was enough. The days that followed Lauren's near tragedy were a blur for Emily. Time felt suspended, yet every minute was a reminder of the broken pieces that had accumulated over the years, pieces that were never truly put back together. Emily's thoughts often lingered on what she could have done differently. She should have noticed sooner. She should have listened more. She should have been there for Lauren before it got this bad. But the weight of regret had already begun to shift into something else. There was no changing what had happened, no time machine to go back and fix everything. What mattered now was how she chose to move forward, not just for herself, but for Lauren and their family. Her mother had been distant, caught in her own spiral of guilt and confusion, while her father seemed to shut down more with each passing day. It was clear that Emily wasn't the only one struggling to process what had happened. They were all broken in their own way. Lauren was still unconscious, and doctors hadn't yet been able to say how long it would take for her to wake up, or even if she would. The uncertainty loomed over everything like a dark cloud. Yet, Emily found herself waking up each day with a new resolve. I can't leave again. Not now. The first morning after Emily's decision to stay was unremarkable in many ways, but it felt different to her. She walked into the hospital, past the sterile white walls, and felt a sense of responsibility like she'd never known before. She wasn't just here to wait for Lauren to wake up. She was here to make things right. Sitting by Lauren's bed that morning, Emily spoke to her sister as if Lauren could hear her, even though she was still unconscious. I don't know how to make up for what I did, she confessed, her voice quiet but firm. But I'm going to try. I'm going to stay. I'm going to fight for us, for our family. Please come back to me. Lauren's condition remained unchanged for the next few days, but Emily didn't leave the hospital. She spent hours by her sister's side, talking, reading, or simply sitting in silence. It felt like an eternity before the doctors finally gave the news she had been waiting for. It was a small shift, barely noticeable at first, but enough to bring a flicker of hope. Lauren was stable enough to begin the long process of recovery. Your sister is awake, the doctor had told her. But it's going to take time. The emotional toll on her is significant. She's going to need support, not just from the medical team, but from her family. Emily stood in that sterile room, trying to find the right words as her heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't prepared for what came next, but she knew this was a pivotal moment. The walls she had built around herself, the emotional distance she had so carefully maintained, now crumbled as she faced the fragile reality of their relationship. Lauren, Emily whispered, sitting gently on the edge of her sister's bed. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. At first, Lauren didn't respond. Her eyes were open, but she looked disoriented, as if she couldn't fully grasp where she was. But Emily didn't mind the silence. This was more than just a physical recovery. It was a chance to rebuild their relationship, to rebuild trust. And that would take time. But the time they had was fleeting. Over the next few days, Lauren's condition improved slightly. She was awake more, though still weak, and her interactions with Emily were tentative. The tension that had been building for years was still there, thick and uncomfortable. Lauren had many questions, but she wasn't ready to ask them yet. It wasn't until a week later that Lauren spoke her first words to Emily, her voice hoarse and shaky from disuse. "Why did you leave?" The question hung in the air, sharp and direct. Emily's heart twisted painfully in her chest. She had anticipated this moment, but no amount of preparation could have made it easier. "I didn't want to leave you, Lauren," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. I thought if I stayed, I'd just keep making things worse. But I should have been there for you. I should have noticed that you were struggling. I should have been your sister, not just the one trying to fix everything." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she spoke, and Lauren seemed to study her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she whispered, "You hurt me." "I know," Emily replied quietly, her voice breaking. "I can't change that, but I can try to make it right. I know I can't fix everything, but I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the weight of everything they had been through had settled in, both of them realizing that words alone wouldn't be enough to bridge the gap. The healing would take time, and they both knew that. Lauren didn't respond right away, and Emily didn't push. She simply stayed there, her presence a quiet acknowledgement of the pain they both carried. As the days went on, Emily's resolve grew stronger. Every moment she spent with Lauren, whether they talked or not, felt like a small victory. She didn't have all the answers, and she couldn't undo the mistakes she had made, but she could be there now. And that was enough. She started reaching out to her parents more, trying to bridge the gap between them as well. She knew they were hurting, too, but the tension that had existed between them for so long still lingered. Emily couldn't do it all on her own, and she realized she needed them just as much as they needed her. It wasn't easy. The wounds were deep, and forgiveness wasn't something that could happen overnight. But Emily knew that healing would only come if they allowed themselves to be vulnerable, to acknowledge the pain, and to move forward, together. Every day was a step forward. Some days were harder than others, but Emily was learning to embrace the uncertainty of it all. She wasn't running anymore. She was facing the mess she had left behind, and she was determined to clean it up no matter how long it took. The days that followed Lauren's awakening were a delicate balance of small victories and painful truths. While Lauren was slowly regaining her strength, it was clear that the road ahead would be long and fraught with emotional hurdles. Emily had hoped that things would naturally fall back into place, but the reality was more complicated. Her sister's recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and Emily knew it would take more than just her presence to heal the rift between them. Lauren remained quiet for most of the days. She was still angry at Emily, angry at their parents, and, in some unspoken way, angry at herself. But what hurt Emily most was the quiet. The silence between them that used to feel comfortable was now suffocating. Emily wasn't sure if it was the years of unspoken resentments, or if it was simply the weight of everything that had happened, but the silence felt heavier than any argument they could have had. It was a Saturday morning when things finally shifted, though. Emily had spent the morning in the small, sterile hospital room, reading quietly by Lauren's side. The hum of the machines had become a familiar soundtrack, and Emily found solace in the routine, even if it wasn't ideal. She had just set down her book when Lauren finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Lauren's voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, one that made Emily's stomach twist. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what Lauren meant at first, but she didn't want to assume. "Tell you what?" she asked cautiously. "You didn't tell me how bad things were. You just left. You acted like I didn't matter." The words hit Emily like a blow to the chest, and for a moment, she couldn't respond. All the guilt she had been carrying came rushing to the surface, making her feel like she couldn't breathe. She had thought that distance was the only way she could deal with the overwhelming pressure of being the perfect daughter and the family's pillar of strength. But now she saw that in doing so, she had unintentionally shut Lauren out, the one person who had always been her closest ally. "I thought I was protecting you," Emily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I stayed, I would just make things worse. I thought I could fix things by leaving." Lauren's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. "By leaving? Is that what you think I needed?" Emily swallowed hard, her throat constricting. "I was scared," she admitted. "I didn't know what to do. I thought if I went away and figured myself out, everything would be okay. But I was wrong. I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most." Lauren shifted slightly in her bed, but her gaze never wavered. "You really thought that was the answer? That I could just figure it out without you?" "No," Emily said, her voice breaking. "I thought that if I stayed, I would always be trapped in the role you wanted me to be. I thought I couldn't be myself and still be your sister. I was so caught up in my own struggle that I couldn't see how much you were hurting." The silence that followed felt like a long, drawn-out pause, filled with so many emotions that neither of them could name. Lauren looked away, her face turning toward the window, the light from the morning sun casting shadows across the room. "I was hurting too, Lauren said quietly. "But I didn't think you cared enough to notice. You were always the strong one, the one who had everything figured out. And I felt like I was drowning." Emily's heart cracked, the weight of those words pressing down on her chest. Lauren had always been the more outspoken one, the one who wore her heart on her sleeve. And yet, she had been drowning all this time, and Emily hadn't even noticed. The realization was like a slap in the face, and Emily felt ashamed. "I never wanted you to feel like that," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I should have been there for you. I should have seen it." Lauren didn't respond immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes, letting the silence take over again. Emily stayed by her side, unsure of what to say next. She had thought that the hardest part was the argument, the blame, but now she realized the true challenge was rebuilding trust, not just between herself and Lauren, but within herself as well. She had to find a way to forgive herself for not being there, for not seeing the signs when Lauren had been struggling. Over the next few days, Emily made it a point to stay with Lauren as much as possible. Every conversation, every interaction, no matter how small, felt like a step toward healing. But Lauren was still hesitant, still holding onto her anger. And Emily knew that would take time. One night, after a particularly quiet dinner, Emily found herself alone in the waiting area outside the hospital room. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and when she pulled it out, she saw that it was a message from her mother. "Emily, we need to talk. Please come home. It's time." Her heart sank as she read the message. Her mother had been avoiding direct conversations with her for days, always acting like everything would be fine once Lauren woke up. But Emily knew that there were so many unresolved issues between them that it would take more than just time to fix them. It would take effort. It would take understanding. She stood up from the bench and walked to Lauren's room, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. When she walked in, Lauren was sleeping, her face peaceful for the first time in days. Emily smiled softly and kissed her sister's forehead, whispering a promise into the quiet room. "I'm here, Lauren. And I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. Together." But even as she said those words, she knew the hardest part wasn't yet behind her. The real work would come when she finally faced her parents, when they all sat down and tried to mend the pieces of their broken family. She wasn't sure what that would look like, but for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. It would be hard. It would be painful. But she was ready. She had to be. The next morning, Emily woke up early, as she had been doing for the past few days. She had already promised herself that no matter how much her body ached or how tired she felt, she would make the most of every moment she had left by Lauren's side. It was a small comfort, but it was the only thing she could hold onto right now. The hospital room was quiet, the only sound being the soft beeping of the machines that monitored Lauren's vital signs. Emily sat at the small table near the window, looking out at the gray sky, feeling a weight on her chest that hadn't lifted since the moment she'd stepped back into Lauren's life. Her mother's message from the night before still weighed heavily on her mind. "Please come home. It's time." Emily had tried to ignore the dread that had settled in her stomach when she read it. She knew what it meant. Her mother wasn't just asking for a casual conversation, she was demanding answers. And Emily knew that her family, would never heal unless they all took a long, hard look at their past, at the things they had left unsaid, and the damage it had caused. After another long, restless hour of sitting with her thoughts, Emily finally decided it was time to face her mother. She couldn't keep avoiding the hard conversations anymore, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. She had started this journey of reconciliation with Lauren, and now it was time to address the deep-rooted issues within the family. As she left the hospital and headed toward the family's house, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled deeper with each step. What would her mother say? Would her father be there too? Would he even say anything, or would he remain silent like he always had? The tension between them all had been building for years, and it had all come to a head in the most unexpected way. She arrived at her parents' home and stood outside for a moment, gathering her thoughts. It had always been a comforting place for her, until recently. The warm, familiar walls that once held so many memories now felt foreign, distant. She took a deep breath and walked in. The house was quiet, but the kitchen light was on. Her mother sat at the table, her face tired and drawn, as if she had not slept well in days. Emily hesitated for a moment in the doorway, unsure of how to start. "You wanted to talk?" Emily asked quietly, her voice betraying the nervousness she felt. Her mother didn't immediately respond. Instead, she motioned for Emily to sit across from her. Emily did, folding her hands in her lap and waiting for her mother to speak. For what felt like an eternity, neither of them said a word. Finally, her mother let out a deep sigh. "I don't know how we got here, Emily. I really don't." Emily's heart clenched, but she kept her eyes focused on her mother. "I think we both know how we got here. We've ignored the problems for so long that they've festered into something we can't run from anymore." Her mother's eyes flickered with something, guilt, maybe, or sadness. "I just don't understand why you left. Why you shut us out like that? You were always the one who held everything together. Your father and we didn't know what to do when you left." "I didn't know what to do either," Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought that if I left, maybe things would be better. But I see now that it only made everything worse." The silence between them stretched, but this time it wasn't as suffocating. Emily could feel her mother's grief, the years of silence and unspoken feelings between them. She could also feel her own pain, her own regret, but she also felt something else, hope. They were finally talking. They were finally confronting the past. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom," Emily said, her voice steadying. "I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now that I was wrong. I should have stayed. I should have been here for you, for Dad, for Lauren." Her mother's face softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no anger or disappointment in her gaze. Just understanding. "I know you thought you were protecting us. But we needed you, Emily. We always did. And when you left, it felt like we lost you, like we lost our family." Emily nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't have all the answers, and she couldn't change the past, but sitting here with her mother, hearing her words, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, things could be different now. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered again, this time more for herself than anyone else. "I'm so sorry for shutting everyone out." Her mother reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. "You don't need to apologize. We both made mistakes. But we can work through this. I just need you to be here. For me. For your father. For Lauren." The words hung in the air like a promise, fragile but sincere. Emily wasn't sure how long it would take to heal the wounds they had all carried for so long, but she was willing to try. And that was a step forward. "We'll figure it out," Emily said, her voice stronger now. "But we can't do it alone. We have to face the truth together." At that moment, her father walked into the room. He looked older, his face lined with age and the burden of years spent keeping everything under wraps. He was silent for a moment, looking at both of them before he finally spoke. "I'm sorry too," he said, his voice low. "I should have been more present. I should have been the father you needed." Emily could feel the weight of his apology, but she wasn't sure how to respond. She had never heard him speak like this before, never heard him admit his own flaws. It was a moment that felt strange, but it also felt like a breakthrough. "We're all hurting," Emily said after a pause. "But we can work through this. We have to." Her father nodded, and for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of something that resembled hope in his eyes. The days that followed Emily's conversation with her parents were filled with moments of quiet reflection and deep, sometimes difficult, discussions. Her mother and father, though cautious and unsure of how to proceed, had both acknowledged the need for change. For the first time in a long while, Emily could sense a shift in the air, an openness to understanding one another in a way that was long overdue. But even as things started to settle at home, there was still the matter of Lauren. Emily had done everything in her power to support her sister physically during her recovery, but emotionally, they were still walking on a razor's edge. Lauren had said she wanted to rebuild their relationship, but her actions had shown the opposite. She was still distant, still angry. And every time Emily tried to reach out, it felt like she was pushing her sister further away. It was a Saturday morning when Emily decided that she couldn't wait any longer. She couldn't keep hiding behind the safety of her own guilt, hoping that time would heal everything. If she was going to make things right, if she was going to rebuild the trust that had been lost, she would have to confront Lauren once again. And this time, it had to be different. She had spent most of the morning sitting by Lauren's bedside, reading quietly, trying to ease into a conversation, but Lauren had been unresponsive. She was still processing everything that had happened. Emily knew that much. But Emily couldn't just sit in silence anymore. She needed to talk. They needed to talk. "Lauren," Emily started, her voice shaky but determined. "Can we talk? I know things have been difficult between us, but I can't keep pretending like everything's okay." Lauren's eyes flickered to her, but she didn't speak. Emily could see the tension in her sister's posture, the way her hands were clenched in her lap as if bracing for something. "I've been trying so hard to fix everything," Emily continued, swallowing the lump in her throat. "But I know that just trying isn't enough. I need to show you that I'm here. I want to be here. I want us to fix this." Lauren finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "How? How do we fix this, Em? You left. You were supposed to be the one who stayed. And when you left, I felt like I didn't matter." The words cut deep, and Emily felt a rush of guilt flood through her. She had always prided herself on being strong, on being the one people could rely on. But now she saw that her actions had been the opposite of what she had intended. She had hurt Lauren. She had hurt the person who mattered most to her. "I was scared," Emily said quietly. "I thought I could make things better by stepping away, by taking some space. But I see now that I made everything worse. I should have stayed. I should have fought for you." Lauren's face twisted, a mix of anger and hurt in her expression. "I didn't need you to fight for me. I just needed you to be here. To see me. To hear me. But you left. and I've had to figure out everything on my own." Emily's heart clenched. "I'm sorry, Lauren. I've been so wrapped up in my own life, in my own problems, that I didn't see how much you were struggling. I didn't see that you needed me. But I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, looking down at her hands. Emily could see how much she was holding back, how much she wanted to scream or cry or lash out. But Lauren didn't. She stayed silent, holding the hurt inside. "I don't know if I can trust you again," Lauren finally said, her voice trembling with the weight of the words. "I don't know if I can believe you when you say you'll stay. You said that before, and then you left. I don't want to get hurt again." The admission hung in the air like a heavy fog. Emily didn't know what to say at first. She wanted to tell Lauren that everything would be okay, that she would never leave her again, but she knew the truth. Words were just words. What Lauren needed was action. She needed to see that Emily was willing to do the work, to prove that she could be trusted again. "I understand," Emily said quietly. "I don't expect you to just forgive me, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll be here, every step of the way. I won't leave you again." Lauren's gaze shifted slightly, a small crack appearing in the wall she had built between them. "How do I know you mean it this time?" she asked, her voice raw. Emily leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "You don't. But I'm going to show you. Every day. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to prove that I can be the sister you deserve." Lauren didn't respond immediately, but Emily could see her sister's internal struggle, the battle between the pain of the past and the longing for the bond they used to have. Emily sat quietly, giving her sister the space to process, not pushing her, just being present. After what felt like an eternity, Lauren finally spoke. "I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were," Lauren said softly, "but I think maybe we can start over." A surge of relief rushed through Emily, but she didn't let herself smile just yet. The journey to rebuilding their relationship wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. But for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. "Starting over sounds good to me," Emily said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "We'll take it one day at a time. I'll be here, and we'll figure this out together." And as she sat by Lauren's bedside, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from everything being perfect. It was the kind that came from knowing that, for the first time, they were both ready to face the future together. It would be difficult, but they would rebuild, piece by piece, with trust and patience. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for them, for her family, and that was all that mattered. The days after their conversation were a delicate balancing act. Emily kept her promise to Lauren, staying by her side as much as she could, offering support and care without pushing too hard. Lauren, though still distant at times, seemed to soften in the presence of her sister. There were small signs of progress, an occasional smile, a shared laugh, or even a brief conversation about something other than the past. But Emily knew that the journey wasn't over and that rebuilding trust was going to take much more than a few heartfelt words. As the days turned into weeks, Emily continued her efforts to mend the relationship with Lauren, even as she worked on her own healing. Her conversations with her parents also evolved, with each member of the family taking small steps toward reconciliation. But there were still so many things left unsaid, so many hurts still lingering beneath the surface. The work wasn't easy, but Emily refused to give up. It was late one evening when Emily found herself sitting by the window in her childhood bedroom, staring out into the dark night. The house was quiet, and for a moment, she allowed herself to reflect on how much had changed in such a short amount of time. She had come so far from the place where she had first felt the need to escape. The guilt, the anger, the fear, those emotions still clung to her like old, familiar friends. But now she was facing them. She was confronting them head-on. The sound of her phone buzzing pulled her out of her thoughts. She glanced down and saw a message from Lauren. "Can we talk?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. The message was simple, but the weight behind it was immense. For weeks now, they had avoided the hard conversations, dancing around the deeper emotions that still held them back. But this message was different. It felt like an invitation, a chance to move forward, to heal together. She quickly typed out a response. "Of course. I'll be there in a few minutes." As she walked down the hallway toward Lauren's room, Emily felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. What would this conversation bring? Would it be another step forward, or would it open old wounds that neither of them were ready to face? When she entered the room, Lauren was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking out the window. The same stillness Emily had felt earlier seemed to linger in the room, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. It was as if they were both waiting for the right words to come. Finally, Lauren spoke, her voice low. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about starting over." Emily sat down beside her, her heart in her throat. "And what do you think?" "I think I'm scared," Lauren admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm scared that if we try to rebuild everything, I'll just end up losing you again. I don't know if I can handle that." Emily placed a hand gently on her sister's. "I get it. I've been scared too. But I promise you, Lauren, I'm not going anywhere this time. I know I messed up and I'll never be able to undo that. But I'm here now. I'm here for good." Lauren turned to look at her, her eyes searching Emily's face. "But what if it's too late?" Emily shook her head. "It's never too late. We're still here. We're still fighting, and that means something. We've been through a lot, and it hasn't been easy, but we can make it through this. Together." For a moment, the room was silent again, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. Emily could feel the vulnerability in both of them, the years of hurt, of misunderstanding, of abandonment, and yet, somehow, they had reached this point. The hardest part wasn't over, but it felt like they had crossed some invisible line, a line that now separated the past from the future. Finally, Lauren nodded, a small tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay, let's try. Let's take it one step at a time." Emily smiled softly, a tear of her own escaping as she pulled Lauren into a hug. "One step at a time," she whispered. In that moment, as they clung to each other, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, and the journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long while, Emily felt like they were heading in the right direction. They were no longer prisoners of their past. They were moving forward. The next few weeks were filled with ups and downs. Some days better than others, but each day a small victory. Emily's relationship with her parents continued to evolve, with more open conversations and fewer walls between them. She began to understand the complexity of the love they all had for one another, even when it was imperfect. Her father, once so distant and silent, started to show his vulnerability in small but meaningful ways. Her mother, though cautious, began to embrace the possibility of healing. Lauren and Emily worked through their issues slowly but surely, learning to trust each other again, to be honest with each other, and to forgive. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, of doubt, but they were no longer running away from the hard things. They were facing them together. One afternoon, as Emily and Lauren sat in the living room, laughing over an old family photo album, Emily realized that they had finally reached a new chapter. A chapter where they weren't defined by the past, but by the choices they made in the present. It wasn't perfect, and there were still scars to heal, but it was real. "I think we're going to be okay," Emily said, looking over at Lauren, who was smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. Lauren nodded. "Yeah, I think we are." And for the first time in a long while, Emily truly believed it. They had made it through the darkest parts of their journey. They had faced the pain, the anger, and the fear. And now, they were stepping into the light together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?